On a cold January afternoon in 2007, police officers in Kirkwood, Missouri, pushed open the door of a modest apartment. They were searching for one boy, a missing 13-year-old named Ben Ownby. What they found inside would shake an entire community. Two boys sat quietly in that cramped room. One of them matched the description of Ben. But the other? His face seemed hauntingly familiar. He was older, thinner, but unmistakable. He was Shawn Hornbeck, a child who had vanished without a trace more than 4 years earlier. For the Akers family, Shawn's parents, this moment was the end of a nightmare they had lived since October 2002. For the officers standing in that room, it was nothing short of a miracle, the kind you don't expect in missing children cases. Imagine the weight of that silence, the disbelief that hung in the air. A boy once thought lost forever, now found alive in the unlikeliest of places. But how did Shawn disappear? How did he survive in plain sight for over 1,500 days? And what darkness was uncovered inside the life he was forced to live? This is the story of Shawn Hornbeck, a story of disappearance, survival, and a family's refusal to surrender hope. Welcome to the Found Files, where the lost are never forgotten, and the found remind us why hope matters. If you believe every missing soul deserves to have their story told, don't just watch, subscribe. Because your support keeps these stories alive. Asterisk. Before the headlines, before the long years of silence, Shawn Hornbeck was just an ordinary boy living an ordinary life. Born on July 17, 1991, in rural Missouri, Shawn grew up in the kind of small-town world where children rode bikes until the streetlights came on, and neighbors waved from porches as they passed. His parents, Pam and Craig Akers, raised him with love, values, and the quiet security of a close-knit family. Shawn was the kind of child who thrived outdoors. He loved riding his bike along familiar country roads, fishing in nearby creeks, and playing video games with friends. To his parents, he was not just their only son, but their pride, the light of their home. The year was 2002, a time before smartphones, before constant GPS tracking. Childhood still carried a sense of freedom. Parents trusted that when their child rode down the block, they would circle back in time for dinner. For Shawn, the world felt safe, predictable, untouched by the kind of fear that would soon grip his family. It was into this ordinary world, into this seemingly safe rhythm of daily life, that fate struck without warning. A single October afternoon would unravel everything the Akers family believed about safety, about trust, and about how quickly an ordinary day can turn into tragedy. October 6, 2002. It was a Sunday afternoon in the quiet community of Richwoods, Missouri. 11-year-old Shawn climbed onto his bike for a short ride, something he had done countless times before. The fall air was cool, the sun dipping low in the sky, and there was nothing unusual about that day. Nothing, until he didn't return. When dinner time came and Shawn's chair sat empty, worry crept into the Akers home. At first, it was the kind of concern every parent knows. Maybe he lost track of time, maybe he stopped at a friend's house. But as the minutes stretched into hours, that worry deepened into dread. His parents searched the nearby roads, calling his name into the fading daylight. Neighbors joined in, flashlights cutting through the darkness. Still, there was no sign of Shawn. Then came the discovery that froze everyone's hearts: his bike, abandoned near the roadside. Upright, as if it had been left in haste. A silent witness to something no one had seen. By nightfall, the truth could no longer be denied. This wasn't a case of a boy who had wandered too far. Something had happened. Something dark. Police arrived, and what followed was a search that spread across woods, rivers, and backroads. Dogs sniffed the ground, helicopters circled overhead, and volunteers combed fields for any trace of the missing boy. But the search yielded nothing. Not a footprint. Not a clue. Just the chilling absence of an 11-year-old child who had vanished into thin air. For the Akers, that night never ended. Their son was gone, swallowed by a mystery that would stretch on for more than 4 years. When Shawn Hornbeck disappeared, he was not lost in the woods or swept away by accident. He was taken by a man who lived less than an hour away. His name was Michael J. Devlin. On the surface, Devlin was unremarkable, a pizza shop manager, a quiet neighbor. But behind closed doors, he hid something monstrous. For Shawn, the nightmare began immediately. Devlin abducted him at gunpoint, silencing the terrified boy with threats that if he tried to run, not only would he be killed, but his family would be killed too. That fear became chains stronger than any lock. Inside Devlin's small apartment in Kirkwood, Missouri, Shawn's life was no longer his own. Days bled into nights in a haze of isolation and abuse. The windows stayed covered, the blinds drawn tight, cutting him off from the world. The boy who once roamed free on his bicycle now lived in a cage of fear. Over time, Devlin allowed Shawn small freedoms, carefully calculated, deeply manipulative. Shawn was sometimes seen outside, riding his bike, even playing video games with other kids. But to those who noticed him, he was just another quiet teenager. They didn't know he was the face on the missing posters, the boy who had been searched for in every creek and forest. Shawn had become invisible in plain sight. Fear and psychological control kept him silent. Every chance to run carried the weight of a whispered threat: if you leave, they die. And so, for more than 4 years, Shawn lived not as the boy he once was, but as a captive, forced into a shadow life, waiting for a miracle no one could predict. While Shawn lived in the shadows of captivity, his family lived in the shadows of uncertainty. Each sunrise brought the same aching question: where is he? Pam and Craig Akers refused to let their son's name fade from memory. They became tireless warriors in the fight to bring him home. Press conferences, interviews, search efforts, they stood before cameras with tearful eyes, begging the world not to forget. When the official searches slowed, the Akers started their own. They created the Shawn Hornbeck Foundation, not only to continue looking for Shawn, but to help other families whose children had vanished. Their pain became purpose, their desperation a lifeline for strangers who understood the same unbearable loss. Year after year, the milestones passed. Birthdays marked with empty chairs. Christmas mornings where presents sat unopened under the tree. An empty bedroom left untouched, as if Shawn might walk through the door at any moment. And still, they held on. To hope. To faith. To the belief that somewhere out there, Shawn was alive. Even as the world moved forward, the Akers lived in pause, caught between memory and possibility. Theirs was a search without an end date, a battle fought in silence against time, doubt, and despair. They could not know that while they searched the forests, rivers, and highways, their son was hidden in plain sight, less than an hour from their home. For more than 4 years, the trail had been cold. Then, in January 2007, another boy went missing. His name was Ben Ownby, just 13 years old, last seen stepping off his school bus in Beaufort, Missouri. Within minutes, he vanished. This time, there was a witness. A teenager named Mitchell Holtz noticed something strange: a white pickup truck speeding away from the scene. He remembered it clearly: the shape, the color, the sound of its engine. His memory would prove to be the spark that reignited everything. Police traced the truck to a man named Michael J. Devlin, living in an unremarkable apartment complex in Kirkwood, Missouri. On January 12, just 4 days after Ben's abduction, officers arrived at the apartment door. They expected to find one missing boy. But when that door opened, they found two. There was Ben, shaken but alive. And beside him, a teenager whose face seemed older, thinner, but achingly familiar. The officers stared in disbelief. This was no stranger. This was Shawn Hornbeck, the boy who had been missing for 1,580 days. In that moment, the impossible had become real. A case once thought unsolvable cracked wide open, not by a seasoned detective, but by the sharp eyes of a teenager who refused to dismiss what he saw. For the Akers family, the phone call came quickly. After 4 long years of uncertainty, the words they had prayed to hear: "We found Shawn. He's alive." The nightmare was ending. The miracle had begun. For over 4 years, Shawn Hornbeck's name had lived only in whispers, in flyers yellowed by weather, in prayers whispered through tears. And now, suddenly, he was real again. Alive. Breathing. A son returning from a silence that had nearly swallowed him forever. There are no words for a moment like this. A mother, clutching the boy she thought she'd lost. A father, tears streaming, refusing to let go. Shawn stood in their arms, changed, older, haunted, but home. For them, he was no longer the boy in the photographs taped to bulletin boards and telephone poles. He was flesh, he was here, he was theirs again. The story of Shawn Hornbeck was no longer only about loss. It had become a story about endurance, about faith stretched to its breaking point but never broken. About a boy who survived the unthinkable and a family who never stopped believing he would come back. For Shawn Hornbeck, the nightmare was over. For his family, the miracle they prayed for had finally arrived. The story of Shawn Hornbeck reminds us of something we must never forget. Behind every missing person's poster is not just a name or a photograph, but a life, a heartbeat, and a family unwilling to let hope die. His survival was nothing short of extraordinary, but for many families, the story does not end this way. Each disappearance leaves behind an echo. An empty chair at the dinner table. A mother waiting by the phone. A community haunted by questions. For every Shawn who returns, there are countless others still lost. Their stories still wait to be told. Their voices still wait to be heard. That is why we tell these stories, so they are not forgotten, so hope continues to burn, so justice is never abandoned. If Shawn's story moved you, and if you believe that every missing person deserves to be remembered, join us. Subscribe to the Found Files, where we uncover the forgotten, give voice to the silenced, and bring light into the darkest mysteries. Because the search never ends, and together, neither does hope.